Welcome back. Okay, pause it. Welcome back to Madhouse Paint Body. In this episode, we're going to show you how we stuffed an LS power plant into our third gen Camaro. Let's get started.
Well, you saw us take the engine out of the Firebird, but now we need a way to pick it up. The LS engine has a plastic intake manifold, so I need a special type of hoist that will pick the engine up without damaging it. But rather than buying one, I had a lot of scrap metal laying around, so I went and bought about $10 worth of chain and made my own. After the new lift cooled off for a while, we bolted it to the engine so that we could then lift it off the floor and take it to where the Camaro had been prepped to receive it. A chain hoist was added to the mix to use as a load leveler and will allow us to tilt the engine forward and backward while we're positioning it in the car. Then the engine was rolled all the way to the other end of the shop, where the Camaro was waiting. At this point, we had been working for most of the day, removing the engine from the Firebird and preparing the Camaro to receive the new engine. So we just couldn't wait any longer. We had to stuff it in to see how it was going to fit. After a lot of shifting the engine around and moving it back and forth and trying to get it to fit, we discovered that it just wasn't going to go in. The crossmember had to be modified in order for the engine to go down. So we decided to call it a day and start fresh the next day. We had marked all the areas on the crossmember that would need to be modified, and then we pulled the engine back out so that we could make the modifications. Engine was going to be a really tight fit against the crossmember. So the first thing I had to do was get these brake lines out of the way so that they wouldn't interfere. And then I began marking the crossmember where I would be making all the cuts. I know I'm not one to lead by example on this topic, but whenever you're dealing with flying metal, you should always wear safety glasses. I had to cut a substantial chunk out of the crossmember in order to make this engine fit. And I know what you're thinking. I just cut out a lot of strings too. But it's okay, because I have a plan. I'll be welding new metal to the front of the crossmember as well as bracing the rear that I just cut out. Because this part of the car supports the engine and ties together the frame rails and lower control arms of the suspension, I'm replacing the 1/8 inch thick metal I cut out with thicker 3/16 plate steel. The LS engine has a vast aftermarket support. In fact, if I wanted to, I could buy everything needed to simply bolt this engine in. But it would be expensive. Part of what I hope to accomplish with this series is to inspire those of you that want to use a small budget and a lot of imagination to build the kind of car you really want. And besides, if I bought everything, then I couldn't say I built it. So with that in mind, I'm taking the metal I have and cutting it a little at a time to fill in the gaping chasm that I created with the cutoff wheel. One by one, pieces are made to fit and then tack welded in place. It's a complex shape to fill, but by being persistent and patient, it all gets done. But I didn't say it was easy. Oh, this is a pain in the ass. Sometimes making your own parts can be quite an adventure. Hey, there's something on fire. Shoot. Here's an example of how I'm modifying this crossmember. This is a small section where the AC compressor needs to clear, but it interferes on the crossmember. So I'm removing the section that needs to come out, and then I'll grind away all the rust to prepare it for welding. Then I'll take small pieces that I make to fill in the extra space and tack weld it in place. I'll continue this process until all the space is filled. After all the pieces are in, I'll weld it up solid. And then finally, I'll take a grinding wheel and smooth out the welds a little bit, just to make it look a little better. This piece represents the last of the modifications to the crossmember before I can get moving with making the engine mounts. The engine was put back in and then removed again in order to figure out how I was going to make the mounts. The pieces that will make up the new motor mounts were drawn out and then cut out of 1/4 inch plate steel. And this is what the motor mounts look like after they're welded up. Yeah. The transmission mount doesn't quite go in the hole, so we're going to make it.
a little bit wider. Just a little bit. Now it fits. So let me show you what I've been working on the past couple hours. When we took the exhaust off, 4 of the exhaust studs broke. So what we've been having to do is drill them out one by one, which is taking forever, and we're making new studs to go through so that we can put the exhaust back on. This is taking forever. I tried other methods such as heating them and clamping with vice grips and even an easy out, but they wouldn't budge. So in order to remove the broken studs, they needed to be drilled out. After the studs are removed, as much as possible without removing the threads anyway, the holes are tapped out to restore the original threads so a new bolt can be put in. Just like the crossmember, the rust on the exhaust manifold has to be removed for welding purposes. So these studs are a 10 by 1.5 by 50 millimeters. I don't have a 10 by 1.5 by 50. I have a 10 by 1.5 by 70. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting these down so that they're like this, so that I can just simply take them, thread them into here. Now the threads are partially damaged, so I wasn't able to use a stud to go back in. So what I would do is tack weld these in place so they don't back out when I tighten the exhaust down. But yay! Exhaust is fixed! The mounts were finished, so they got bolted to the finished and painted crossmember. The motor mounts also got painted, but I forgot to film that. But now the engine can go in for the final time. The engine was close to its final resting place, so all that was left was to put the long bolts into the motor mounts to secure it in place. And here it is. The engine is resting on its mounts unsupported from the engine crane. It makes us both immeasurably happy to have this power plant finally sitting in the engine bay. High five! We hope you're enjoying this series, And if you are, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on seeing how we got the car running. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and share. And we'll see you in the next episode.